Now Benhadad, the king of Aram, rallied his whole army. With him were 32 kings, besides horses and chariots. Then he marched on Shamron and laid siege to it. He sent messengers inside the city to Achav, king of Israel, to say to him, "Here is the message from Benhadad. Your silver and gold are mine. Also your wives and your best children are mine." The king of Israel answered, "Just as you say, my lord king, I am yours along with everything I own." The messengers returned and said, "Here is Benhadad's response. I sent you a message to hand over your silver, gold, wives, and children to me. But I'm going to send my servants to you tomorrow around this time. They will ransack your house and the houses of your servants, and whatever they see that they like, they will seize and remove." Then the king of Israel summoned all the leaders of the land and said, "Please take notice. You see how this man is trying to make trouble? First, he demanded my wives, children, silver, and gold, and I denied him nothing. All the leaders and all the people said to him, 'Don't listen, don't agree.' So he said to Benhadad's messengers, 'Tell my lord the king, I will do all that you asked of me the first time, but this I cannot do.' The messengers left and brought back word to him. Benhadad then sent this message to him, 'May the gods do terrible things to me, and worse ones as well, if there's enough dust in Shamron to give each of my followers a handful.' The king of Israel answered, 'Tell him, he who is putting on his armor shouldn't boast as if he were taking it off.' It happened that Benhadad received this message when he was drinking, he and his kings, in the field brax. He ordered his servants, 'Take up your battle positions.' So they got ready to attack the city. At that moment, a prophet approached, Achav, king of Israel, and said, 'Here is what Adonai says. Have you seen this vast army? I'm going to give you victory over them today. Then you will know that I am Adonai.' Achav asked, 'Who will defeat them?' He answered, 'This is what Adonai says. The young men who serve the district governors,' he asked, 'who will start fighting?' And he answered, 'You will.' He counted the district governor's young men, and there were 232. After that, he counted all the people of Israel. There were 7,000. They set out at noon. Benhadad was drinking himself senseless in the field brax, he and the kings and the 32 kings who were his allies. The district governor's men went out first. Benhadad sent for information, and they reported, 'Men have come out from Shamron.' He said, 'Whether they have come out for peace or for war, take them alive.' So the district governor's men left the city, followed by the army, and each one killed his man. Aram fled, and Israel pursued them. Benhadad, king of Aram, escaped on his horseback with some of the cavalry. The king and Israel went out and attacked the horses and chariots, inflicting a massive defeat on Aram. Afterwards, the prophet approached the king of Israel and said to him, 'Go, regroup your forces, and think carefully what to do. For next year at this time, the king of Aram will renew his attack.' Meanwhile, the servants of the king of Aram said to him, 'Their God is a God of the hills. That's why they are stronger than we are. But if we fight them on level ground, we will certainly be stronger than they are. Also do this, remove all the kings from their commanders and put professional officers in their place. Then recruit an army as big as the army you lost, horse for horse, chariot for chariot. We will attack them on level ground, and we will certainly be stronger than they.' He heeded what they said and acted accordingly. At the same time, the following year, Benhadad mustered the army of Aram and went up to Aphek to attack Israel. The army of Israel, already mobilized and supplied, went to meet them, but the army of Israel encamped opposite them, looked like two herds of goats, while Aram filled the land. At this point, a man of God approached and said to the king of Israel, 'Here is what Adonai says. Because Aram said that Adonai is God of the hills, but not God of the valleys, I will hand over to you this entire huge army, and you will know that I am Adonai. They remained in camp opposite each other for 7 days. On the seventh day, the battle began. The people of Israel killed 100,000 soldiers of Aram in a single day. The rest fled to Aphek into the city, and the wall fell on 27,000 of the men who were left. Ben-Hadad fled into the city and took refuge in an inside room. His servant said to him, "Here, now, we have heard that the kings of the house of Israel are merciful kings. If it's all right with you, let's put sackcloth around our waist and ropes on our heads and go out to the king of Israel. Maybe he will spare our life." So they put sackcloth around their waist and ropes on their heads, went to the king of Israel and said, "Your servant Ben-Hadad says, 'Please spare my life.'" And he answered, "He's still alive? He is my brother." The men took this as a promising indicator and seized on it to say, "Yes, Ben-Hadad is your brother." Then Achav said, "Go, bring him here." Ben-Hadad went out to him, and Achav had him climb up into his chariot. Ben-Hadad said to him, "I will return the cities my father took from your father. Also, you can set up markets for trade in Damascus, as my father did in Shomron, if you put this covenant in writing. And Achav, I will set you free." So he made a covenant with him and set him free. One of the members of the prophets' guild said to one another, "By the word of Adonai, hit me." The man refused to hit him. And he said to him, "Because you didn't listen to the voice of Adonai, the moment you leave me, a lion will kill you." No sooner had he left him, a lion found him and killed him. The prophet went to another man and said, "Hit me." The man struck a blow and wounded him. The prophet left, waited for the king by the road, disguised himself with a bandage over his eyes. As the king passed by, he called out to the king and said, "Your servant was on his way, thick fighting, and when someone turned, brought a man to me and said, 'Guard this man. If he is missing, you will pay for his life with yours, or else you will pay 66 pounds of silver.' While your servant was busy with one thing and another, he disappeared." The king of Israel said to him, "So that is your sentence? You have pronounced it on yourself?" Quickly he removed the bandage from his eyes, and the king of Israel recognized him as one of the prophets. And he said to the king, "Here is what Adonai says. Because you have let escape the man I had given over to be destroyed, you will pay with your life, for the life with your people, for his people." The king of Israel returned home to Shomron, resentful and depressed. A while later, an incident occurred involving Navat, the Yisraeli. He owned a vineyard in Yisrael, right next to the palace of Achav, king of Shomron. Achav spoke to Navat and said, "Give me your vineyard so that I can have it as my vegetable garden, because it's close to my palace. In exchange, I will give you a better vineyard, or if you prefer, I will give you its monetary value." But Natav said to Achav, "Adonai forbid that I should give you my ancestral heritage." Achav went home resentful and depressed at what Natav the Yisraeli had said to him, since he had said, "I won't give you my ancestral heritage." He lay down on his bed, turned his face away, and refused to eat. Isabel, his wife, went and said to him, "Why are you so depressed that you refuse to eat?" He answered her, "Because I spoke to Navat, the Yisraeli, and said to him, 'Sell me your vineyard for money, or else, if you prefer, I will give you another vineyard for it.' But he answered, 'I won't give you my vineyard. Are you the king of Israel or not?' Asked the wife Isabel, 'Get up, eat some food, cheer up, and I will give you the vineyard of Navat, the Yisraeli.' So she wrote letters in Achav's name, sealed them with his seal, and sent the letters to the leaders of the nobles of the city where Navat lived. In the letters she wrote, 'Proclaim a fast, and give Navat the seat of honor among the people. Have 2 good-for-nothing men sit opposite him, and have them accuse him publicly of cursing God the king. cursing God and the king. Then take him outside and stone him to death." The leaders and notables of the city he lived in did as Isabel had written in the letters she sent to them. They proclaimed a fast and gave Navat the seat of honor among the people. The two good-for-nothing men came in and sat opposite him, and these scoundrels publicly accused Navat, saying, "Navat cursed God and the king." So they took him outside of the city and stoned him to death. Then sent a message to Isabel, "Navat has been stoned to death." When Isabel heard that Navat had been stoned to death, she said to Achav, "Get up and take possession of the vineyard that Navat the Israeli refused to sell you, because Navat is no longer alive, he is dead." When Achav heard that Navat was dead, he sent out to go down to the vineyard of Navat the Israeli to take possession of it. But the word of Adonai came to Eliyahu from Tishbe, "Get up, go down to meet Achav, king of Israel, who lives in Shamron. Right now he is in the vineyard of Nabat. He has gone down there to take possession of it. This is what you are to say to him. Here is what Adonai says: You have committed murder, and now you are stealing the victim's property. Also say to him, here is what Adonai says: in the very place where dogs licked up the blood of Nabat, dogs will lick up your blood, yours." Achav said to Eliyahu, "My enemy, you found me." He answered and said, "I have found you because you have given yourself over to what is evil from Adonai's perspective. Here, says Adonai, I am bringing disaster on you. I will sweep you away completely. I will cut off from Achav every male, whether a slave or free in Israel. I will make your house like the house of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, and like the house of Baasha, the son of Achiah, for provoking my anger and leading Israel into sin." Adonai also said this about Isabel: "The dogs will eat Isabel by the wall around Yisrael. If someone from the line of Achav dies in the cities, the dogs will eat him. If he dies in the countryside, the vultures will eat him. Truly, there will never be anyone like Achav, stirred up by his wife Isabel. He gave himself over to what is evil from Adonai's perspective. His behavior in following idols was grossly abominable. He did everything that Imri had done, whom Adonai expelled the head of the people of Israel. Achav, on hearing these words, tore his clothes, put sackcloth on himself, and fasted. He slept in the sackcloth and went about dejectedly. Then the word of Adonai came to Eliyahu from Tishbe: "Do you see how Achav has humbled himself before me? Since he has humbled himself before me, I will not bring this evil during his lifetime, but during his son's lifetime, I will bring the evil on his house." For 3 years there was no war between Aram and Israel. Then in the 3rd year, Jehoshaphat, the king of Yehudah, came down to the king of Israel. The king of Israel said to his servants, "Are you aware that Ramoth Gilead belongs to us? Yet we're doing nothing to recover it from the king of Aram." He said to Jehoshaphat, "Will you go with me to attack Ramoth Gilead?" Jehoshaphat answered to the king, "I'm with you all the way. Think of my troops and horses as yours." Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, "First, we should seek the word of Adonai." So the king of Israel assembled the prophets, about 400 men. "Should I attack Ramoth Gilead?" he asked them, "or should I hold off?" They said, "Attack. Adonai will hand it over to the king." But Jehoshaphat said, "Besides these, isn't there a prophet of Adonai here that we can consult?" The king of Adonai said to Jehoshaphat, "Yes, there is still one man, though, whom we can consult Adonai, Mechahehu, the son of Yimlah. But I hate him, because he doesn't prophesy good things for me, but bad." Jehoshaphat replied, "The king shouldn't say such a thing." Then the king of Israel called an officer and said, "Quickly, bring Mechahehu, the son of Yimlah." Now the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, the king of Yehudah, were each sitting on his throne, dressed in their royal robes, on the threshing floor at the entrance of the gate of Shamron, and all the prophets were there prophesying in their presence: Zedekiah, Zedekiah, the king of Chenaanah, had made himself some horns out of iron and said, "This is what Adonai says. With these you will gore Aram until they are destroyed." All the prophets prophesied the same thing. "Go up and attack Ramoth Gilead. You will succeed, for Adonai will hand it over to the king." The messenger who had gone to call Micaiah said to him, "Here, now, the prophets are unanimously predicting success for the king. Please let your word be like the word of one of them. Say something good." But Micaiah answered, "As Adonai lives, whatever Adonai says to me is what I will say." When he reached the king asked him, "Micaiah, should we go up and attack Ramoth Gilead, or should we hold off?" He answered, "Go up, you will succeed. Adonai will hand it over to the king." The king said to him, "How many times do I have to warn you to tell me nothing but the truth in the name of Adonai?" Then he said to him, "I saw all Israel scattered over the hills like sheep without a shepherd. And Adonai said, 'These men have no leader. Let everyone go home in peace.'" The king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, "Didn't I tell you that he wouldn't prophesy good things about me, but bad?" Micaiah continued, "Therefore hear the word of Adonai. I saw Adonai sitting on his throne, the whole army of heaven standing by him at his right hand and on his left." Adonai asked, "Who will entice Achav to go up to his death at Ramoth Gilead?" One of them said, "Do in this way," and another, "Do it that way." Then a spirit stepped up, stood in front of Adonai, and said, "I will entice him." Adonai asked, "How?" And he answered, "I will go and be a deceiving spirit in the mouths of all his prophets." Adonai said, "You will succeed in enticing him. Go and do it." So now Adonai has put a deceiving spirit in the mouths of all these prophets of yours. Meanwhile, Adonai has ordained disaster for you. Then Zedekiah, the son of Chenaanah, came, slapped Micaiah in the face, and said, "And how did the spirit of Adonai leave me to speak to you?" Micaiah said, "You'll find out the day you go into the inside room trying to hide." The king of Israel said, "Seize Micaiah. Take him back to Amon, the governor of the city of Joash, king's son. Say, 'King says to put this man in prison and feed him only bread and water, and not much of that, until I return in peace.'" Micaiah said, "If you return in peace at all, Adonai has not spoken through me." Then he added, "Did you hear me, you peoples, all of you?" So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, the king of Yehudah, went up to Ramoth Gilead. The king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, "I will disguise myself and go into battle, but you put on your robes." So the king of Israel disguised himself and went into battle. Now the king of Aram had ordered 32 chariot commanders, "Don't attack anyone, either high or low rank, only the king of Israel." So when the chariot commanders saw Jehoshaphat, they said, "This must be the king of Israel," and turned to attack him. But Jehoshaphat gave a yell, so that the chariot commanders saw that he wasn't the king of Israel and stopped pursuing him. However, one soldier shot an arrow at random and struck the king of Israel between his lower armor and his breastplate. So the king said to his chariot driver, "Turn the reins and take me out of the fighting. I'm collapsing from my wounds." The fighting grew fiercer that day, and they propped the king upright in his chariot facing Aram until he died. In the evening, with his blood streaming from the wound onto the floor of the chariot. Around sundown, a cry spread throughout the ranks. Every man to his own town, every man to his own land. So the king died and was brought to Shamron. They buried the king of Shamron. They washed the chariot at the pool of Shamron, where the prostitutes bathed, and the dogs licked up his blood, in keeping with the word of Adonai had spoken. Other activities of Achav reign, all his accomplishments, the ivory palace he built, and all the cities he built are recorded in the annals of the kings of Israel. So Achav slept with his ancestors, and Ahaziah, his son, became king in his place. Jehoshaphat, the son of Asa, began to reign over Yehuda in the 4th year of Achav, king of Israel. Jehoshaphat was 35 years old when he began to rule, and he ruled 25 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Azubah, the daughter of Shilki. He lived in the manner of Asa his father, did not turn away from it, doing what was right from Adonai's perspective. Although the high places were not taken away, the people still sacrificed and presented offerings on the high places. Jehoshaphat made peace with the king of Israel. Other activities of Jehoshaphat, all his power he demonstrated, and how he made war, are recorded in the annals of the kings of Yehuda. He rid the land of the male and female cult prostitutes remaining from the time of his father Asa. There had previously been no king of Edom, but now a deputy was made king. Jehoshaphat built some large Tarshish ships to go to Ophir for gold, but they didn't make the voyage because they were wrecked at Etzon Gever. Achaziah, the son of Achav, suggested to Jehoshaphat that his men should go by sea with Jehoshaphat's men, but Jehoshaphat would not agree. So Jehoshaphat slept with his ancestors and was buried with his ancestors in the city of David, his ancestor. And Jehoram, his son, became king in his place. Achaziah, the son of Achav, began his reign over Israel in Shamron in the 17th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Yehuda, and he ruled 2 years over Israel. He did what was evil from Adonai's perspective, living in the manner of his father, his mother, and Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, by which he led Israel into sin. He also served Baal and worshipped him, and he made Adonai, the God of Israel, angry in keeping everything his father had done.